The gun comes out and we shoot a prescribed number of rounds. What happens every time the gun comes out and we're involved in an incident? It becomes a shooting solution.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we train students to process information and understand that the gun can't come out until means, intent, and ability are met?
Mm-hmm.
And so say they meet that preamble and, we go and we draw the gun, but in the process of us employing the gun, they decide that we're not a soft target and don't want to play anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But we haven't trained to stop the action that we started, and we shoot somebody that doesn't deserve to be shot. And I had a woman in class, and she was like, she used examples. She's like, if my kids are with me, she's like, kind of the mama bear thing. I'll fight and do everything. But she's like, if my kids aren't with me, I don't know if I would have that fight in me. And I started to answer it, and Callie, my wife, interjected, and it was great timing, and especially coming from a woman. She said, you'll fight when your kids are there, but she's like, if they're not there, you're not going to fight as hard, but don't you have a responsibility to your children to go home and to protect them and to make sure that, they're safe and they grow up and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And that really put it into perspective for her. So it's like somewhere someone loves you and expects you to come home. You have a large responsibility when you strap a gun on and step down the path to become an armed citizen. And part of that responsibility is being safe and going home at night to the people that love you and living a good life.
If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. Please subscribe on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple iTunes, and anywhere else that you can see me or hear my voice. If you don't want to miss another episode of Defenders Live, you can join our free community at defenders-live.com and become a free subscriber. Lastly, if you're looking for exceptional firearms or self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and look at their calendar to see what training is coming to you this year. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Lora Thorson. Shane Kerwin retired from the United States Army in the fall of 2018 with 24 years of service. The last 16 years were with the Army, where he spent serving the 5th Special Forces Airborne out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. A large portion of Shane's time was as a Special Forces medical sergeant. He served in the roles of Operational Detachment Junior Medic, Senior Medic, and Company Medic. Shane worked in the 5th Special Forces Group Sniper Committee, where he was a lead instructor, senior cadre, and non-commissioned officer in charge. He was honored to be responsible for the reorganization of this course and updating the curriculum to meet the needs of the ever-changing environment that Special Forces snipers work in. Following this time with the Sniper Committee, he returned to an operational company and was the company operations sergeant before becoming the ops sergeant of Operational Detachment Alpha 5333. During his tenure in the military, Shane deployed 7 times in support of the global war on terror. His educational background spans a diverse assortment of schooling, where he holds a variety of certifications in both civilian and military medicine, as well as an extensive resume of firearms and tactics courses. Additionally, he is a current member of several law enforcement and military organizations. There is so much here that we can unpack. Let's welcome Shane Kerwin onto the show. Hey, Shane.
Hey, thanks. You killed it.
I did. Well, there I had a flub, but I'm just a normal human, right? I think people don't even care if I have a flub because
I think we all got them.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So I met you on a previous podcast that we did with Steve Moses and the whole group with Chuck Haggard. I can't remember all of them that are doing the Tactical Anatomy Summit. And I asked you to have a repeat episode with me because I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. And for whatever reason, I don't know, I can't put my finger on. We were talking before the show. I feel like we just kind of connected and hit it off. And I really like not just your style, but I think you have a way of connecting with people that I really appreciate. And so I'd like to kind of dive in first, if you want, into obviously your background is remarkable. I mean, I wouldn't even know where to begin to really unpack that. But it gives you a really unique perspective as far as your background and how you look at the world, I would imagine, your worldview. But then applying that in a civilian context, have you found that hard to do? Was that a hard transition for you in the beginning?
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. I think we had, a connection. And I think, as we were talking before, it's an important thing, when you are an instructor. And, one of the things I kind of break it down, and Brian Hill and I have kind of the same philosophy on this is, when somebody starts down the path, we take on an instructor role, but as they continue going, that role kind of changes and it goes from instructor to kind of mentor and then coach. And then, we fluctuate between them as we go. But you establish, this bond and with people. And it's something I think it's an important characteristic of an instructor. But, going back to your original question, as far as, the transition out, I do think I have a pretty unique experiential base from coming from the military side. But then also about 2007, I was fortunate. I had a company in Tennessee here approach me. I had taken some classes as a student with them. And they had asked me a couple times about, teaching with them. And I was really operational at the time. It was the height of, the Iraq war and that. And we were gone all the time. I was gone about 10 months out of every year between deployments and train ups and individual schools and things like that. And so when I went down to the sniper committee for a little bit of a break, I wasn't exclusively stateside all the time because I deployed out of the sniper committee a couple times. But I had more stability and I was home. And so I spoke to them and they said, hey, I said, is that, opportunity still there to teach? And they said, yeah. So that I had this concurrent path where the military stuff and, special forces guys in particular are known as, teachers and instructors. We go all over the world and teach indigenous forces how to protect themselves and defend, their country. And then I was doing it on what I refer to as the armed citizen side. And so I took all that, and when I got towards the end of my career, and with the encouragement of Craig Douglas and the late Paul Gomez and a couple other people, they were like, you should maybe do something with this. And so that's how Personal Survival Solutions came about. And one of the main things that I did when I was starting the company is I sat down and I thought about, I'm like, what demographic do I want to impact? Okay? And it's nothing against my fellow service members and special operations guys that get out and start training companies. But I think their focus is a little bit different. We see a lot of guys that are out there that teach the dynamic things of like they did when they were in whatever special operations unit that they were in, close quarter battle or whatever the case may be. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the demographic that I really wanted to try and impact, and we've based all our curriculum off of it, is just your everyday person that wants to learn how to be able to protect themselves, protect the people they care about. If, an event arises and they have to take care of business, be their own first responder. And so that's where my focus was. And so the transition, I don't think was too bad because that's where I was concentrating on, where the business was going to go. Now, that being said, that I think I put it in the email that I sent you earlier is, I look at that. I think some people have a propensity to be an instructor or to teach. It's just something that they're somewhat born with. Maybe it's the gift of gab, or I always say I'm a really good BSer. But with that, it's something that needs to continue to be cultivated. So, as I've continued down, I've been retired, going on 7 years. And the way that I teach now and interact with students in my curriculum is much different than in 2018 when it first started. It was much different from last year. I'm hoping it's getting better. And well, so
I don't know, but I can only relate to this I'm an instructor too. But as far as the podcasting goes, if I look back even just a year ago or a couple of years ago, if you don't cringe a little bit, just a little bit, that means you're not growing. There should be something about what you were doing last year or the year before. I think no matter what you're doing, if you're looking to grow in that area, there should be something about it that you look back, and you can look back at with fondness, right? And not beat yourself up, but just be like, wow, I have grown a lot. I've come a long way. I would never do that now, say that now, or whatever the thing is, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a good indicator of growth. And I also think just as for me, at least on the podcast side of it, being authentic with who I am. Yeah, I was that person back then. I'm not that person now, but I'm not going to hide who I was then. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go back and delete all those shows because that's honest about where I was then.
Well, and the thing is that, at that time you were doing it the best way that knew how.
Yeah.
And I think, in the training industry too, there's always a lot of the internet. I'm like not a big tech guy, and my wife does all the social media posts and all the admin stuff and that. And, I follow things and check it, but it's just not my thing. But I see all the little squabbles that are going on. And I think they're pretty parochial for the most part. But, like if you look back in history and like how we've done things as far as training, stuff that people look back now and they're like, oh, that's antiquated, or, look how they did it back then. And they're failing to kind of see the big picture, because it was like, we stand on the shoulder of giants that come before us, and what they were teaching then was the best that they knew at the time. And we've continued to evolve. And
and if you have that attitude towards the industry, it might be that you could have that attitude towards students that come in too. I think one of the most important things that we can do as instructors is meet people where they are.
Absolutely.
And not expect something of them that they're just not capable of right now, or expect them to know things that they just don't know. And I think that's part of just putting, your ego aside, your judgment aside, and caring more about the people in front of you than, how much you know or whatever. And I kind of see that same vein in the training industry as well.
Sure. Yeah. You have to have expectation management.
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
Sometimes that's a hard thing to do. And, coming from my former line of work, the people who are within the ranks there, they're specifically chosen and selected for certain psychological, physical, mental aspects that I don't want to say that not normal people have, but for a lack of a better descriptor. And there's a reason that they're there. And then, as if you migrate out and now you're, and I very cautiously say the civilian area, because that's how I started getting into the armed citizen thing, because I said, the difference between the military and civilians, and I got a lot of dirty looks. And I was like, I didn't know that was a derogatory term. And as soon as I started using armed citizen, people were like, yeah. And,
oh, wow. That's interesting.
It was, it made a big difference, and I sat down and I analyzed it a little bit, and I'm like, okay, I get, where people are going. They're a citizen, they're a gun owner, and now they've stepped down the path to learn how to protect themselves and take care of, their own. And so now they're an armed citizen, and that really means something when you call them that. And but you also, like I said, you have to have that expectation management, because like you're not dealing with a bunch of special forces guys. You're dealing with a variety of different people that have physical limitations, maybe a great or small experiential base. They might suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect, where they think that they're really good, but when it comes time to perform, they're not. And we have to recognize all that and try and bring them up to as best as they can possibly be, wherever they are at on that particular path.
Yeah, that's read the room. I mean, the bottom line is read the room, and you don't have to read minds, but you do have to be, I think, keenly aware of where people are, and knowing what they are expecting to get from you and from the class, and can I deliver that?
Sure.
You mentioned in the military that particular people were selected based on temperament, skill set, physical ability, and all of that.
Sure.
I wonder, it made me think about, you said in your bio that you were a sergeant medic and a sniper, correct? Is that right? Okay.
Yep.
What kind of particular temperament, characteristics, qualities do those people in that role have to have in order to be good at their jobs?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. So, like I was saying, when you decide to attempt to go to special forces, it starts off with special forces assessment and selection. So, and it's changed throughout the years. So I don't really know currently what it is, but when I went, it was a 3-week selection process, a lot of physical events. They test you in leadership positions to see where you're at, but you also take a lot of psychological tests too, to see what your temperament is, what job, if you make it through the selection process, that would best fit you, and they check your aptitude scores and things like that. And so when I went to selection and made it through, I kind of had an idea, like I wanted to be like most of the other guys who go through the course, and I want to be a weapons guy because, I like to shoot guns, and it's also the shortest course. So the medical course in and of itself is the medic portion is a year, and the rest of the qualification course is for if you go into to be a medical sergeant is about 2 years. Okay. And then when you add language school and SEER, the survival school, I was there for about 2.5 years with training. But when you get through the selection process and they bring you into the classroom and tell you that you have been selected, they have a folder there and they tell you eventually to open the folder. And I was like, let it be a weapons guy. But I knew because I knew what my test scores were. And I think I'm a relatively intelligent human being. And so I was like, I have a feeling it's either going to be a medic or a communications guy, because those are the tougher courses. And so when I opened it, it was the medical sergeant's course. And I have absolutely no regrets because anybody can shoot guns. When you're on a special forces team, that's one of our primary jobs. You need to be able to shoot, your rifles, your pistols, various other things. We cross train, but not everybody has the skills to be, a medical sergeant. And the training is very extensive. And so how did that lead me then into the sniper stuff? Well, when I first went in the Army, I went to Korea. It was my first duty assignment. And I had kind of one of the things that led me to going in the Army is, number one, my dad, he had been drafted and did a couple years. So I, thought that was really honorable. Not that he had a choice, he was drafted, but he served with honor. And then I was going to college and I was reading various books of Vietnam era stuff and like reconnaissance teams and special forces teams and sniper operations. And it really interested me. And, I was already shooting, I was shooting from a young age. And so I went to Korea and I got picked to be in the DMZ scout platoon that was up there. And we were the only Americans that were left that were doing counter-infiltration patrols against the North Koreans. It was a pretty vanilla mission, but I mean, it was really the only thing that was going on at the time. And towards the end of my time in Korea, there was a special forces team out of First Group, which their area of responsibility is all of Asia, that was doing a mobile training team and doing a 5-day sniper course. And even though I was coming back to the States to go to a different unit and they were going to lose me, I talked them into letting me go. And so I went through that course. So it was my first real exposure to special forces and my first real exposure to any type of, sniper operations and, sniper type of shooting. And when I got to the 82nd Airborne, I went to another scout platoon, reconnaissance platoon, and I ended up in a sniper section there. And so then fast forward when I went to selection and I got to my team after I got through all the training through the qualification course and that the first thing that I did a couple of weeks after I got to the unit was they sent me down to our in-house sniper program, which was a 6-week sniper program. And I was a student there. And later on, I ended up going back and instructing at that course and, helping change it up in that. And so, some of the things with that, with a medic, and then, parallel with the sniper is both of them, I think you have to be, relatively intelligent because there's, math and critical thinking.
Lots of variables.
Yep. With sniper operations, the same thing as a medic. I mean, they emphasize a lot of trauma medicine, but also I said our training is extensive. We did, diagnosis, we did veterinary medicine, we did some dental, you learn to read x-rays, put casts on, set breaks, do minor surgery, do anesthesia. And so, you have to be able to do the calculations. You have to be able to understand the physiology of what's going on in the body. And so you have to be, somewhat intelligent to be able to do that. The other thing I think, and I think it goes with both of those roles, is you have to have a lot of patience.
Do you have a lot of patience?
I do think I have quite a bit of patience, or at least my wife does. She's like, I don't know how you don't just explode sometimes.
Yeah, you seem really laid back. That's kind of the reason why I asked the question, because there's something about you that is very composed.
I try to be.
Yeah. Because even in the beginning of this interview, I could tell you're a little bit nervous, but you were still composed. If you weren't really paying attention, no one would even know.
Sure.
And I'm like, I wonder if he learned that or if that's just who he is. And so have you always kind of been that way?
It's funny that you asked that question because somebody had asked me that recently. I can't remember who it was. They asked me the exact same question.
Oh, really?
And yeah, it was the exact same question. I mean, it was phrased just a little bit different, but it was the exact same question. And I think part of it is my personality. So I think it's something that I've always had with that, kind of like with the instructor thing. I think it's something that you need to continue to cultivate.
Yeah.
And then with my, my particular profession and the jobs that I had within that profession, you needed patience and critical thinking ability. And when chaos is going around you, you can't let the chaos envelope you, because you need to critically think and solve problems. And so I think, because my personality was like that, and I've cultivated that patience, and then the jobs that I've had, it's just all kind of came together. So like, I really try to be laid back, and because I'm like, really, especially now, I'm like, there's nothing critical going on. And, even if, say, an incident or, a crisis happens, it's just a problem for us to solve.
Yeah.
And losing our heads isn't going to solve it any faster. It's actually going to make it a lot more difficult.
Was there ever a time where you were right on the line, though, where something really rattled you and you really had to rein it back in? Or
yeah, I can't think of anything specifically right now. I know there's instances, but being under a stress load for an extremely long period of time, and normally it seems like for me it's something little, and I'm like, okay, I got to rein it in, because like I'm gonna either just like shut down.
What do you do when that happens?
Pretty much what I tell my students with stuff. It's sit back, take a deep breath, look around, and make a decision.
Breathe. Yeah.
And so, I've implemented that into classes. And so
that might be one of the most important components of an armed citizen, in my opinion. I know that accuracy is important and speed is important, but I think for me, the mind game that's played under stress is just, I don't think it's like, I don't want to say it's overlooked, because it's not, but I don't think it's talked about enough. And
I agree.
You take those same people standing on a flat range with zero movement, and zero stress, which I get, that's where you have to start. But because even to some people, that's a stressful environment right there.
Sure.
That's enough for them. But if a person never graduates from that and then thinks that they can go out in the real world and, just magically be able to make decisions under stress in a gunfight, I think that's a disservice to the student to allow them to think that.
Nope, I completely agree. And like I tell people, I'm like, I'll ask them, I'm like, what's a gunfight? And, they'll be like, well, you just said it, it's a gunfight. And I was like, no, it's a problem. It's a problem to solve. And you have to be able to critically think and solve that problem. And other problems are going to arise as you're trying to solve that particular problem. But at the end of the day, it's just a problem. It just happens to involve guns and have deadly consequences.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to, you said it, you start out and you build them a foundation, in a very controlled environment, and they're already under a stress load if it's new to them, but you give them an experiential base and you build that foundation, and then you start to add realistic context as you go.
Right.
And
yeah, because you can't throw the whole kitchen sink at them on day one, or they're just going to melt.
Yeah. They just shut down and be like,
and that doesn't help anything. Well, since we're kind of going down that rabbit hole, let's keep going. I have other questions for you I wrote down here, but it's so funny because one of these sections I had under my question is the art and science of teaching under stress. That's so funny. You talk about making training recent, relevant, and realistic. Could you unpack that a little bit more and how you go about that?
Sure. And I think we already started on it, just,
yeah, we did. Organic.
You actually said it. And I think it's great is, there's a lot of things. I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that are important. There's some things that are like really important that, like you said, not that they're not talked about, but they're not talked about enough, or there's not enough emphasis on them. And so one of the things that, I've really been looking at over, the last year is, a couple things, but one is like how, when we teach, how do we make that recent, relevant, realistic, but how can we impart that knowledge onto somebody and develop our curriculum so that it goes into procedural long-term memory, so that it can be recalled under stress, because, and not to get like neuroscience and learning right now is like my thing. I'm a complete layman in it, but I read a lot.
Yeah.
And I did actually have a guy who was a neurologist one time. I didn't know it. After class, he was like, "Do you know what I do or did? I'm retired." And I was like, "No." He's like, I was a neuro guy." And he's like, I was like, "How'd I do?" And he's like, you were spot on. And
that's great.
Yeah. But we've got our short-term memory, and we've got two different types of long-term memory. And the one that we're targeting, or we should be targeting with our training, is that procedural long-term memory, which is the subconscious mind that can be recalled under stress. As opposed to declarative memory, which is the conscious mind, which a lot of training is focused on, and goes away under stress. And there's other neuro terms for them that are they use. But so there's that, like how they retain that. But then as we go, how do we make these things relevant? And I will tell the students, because a lot of times when you go and you're a student in a class, in a shooting class, what do you expect to do? You expect to shoot, right? And I tell people, I'm like, we're going to do plenty of that, but that equate to what happens out in the world. So, how many times have we start looking at actual encounters with armed citizens and criminals that, very few times is shooting involved. A lot of times there's not the firearm, it doesn't even get introduced. So why do we train where every time we, go to a gun class, we shoot all the time? Because, well, if we put up that, hey, we're going to do all this other realistic stuff, we never have any students.
Right.
But if we train ourselves to do something in a pattern, and like I'll say, anytime we do an action, whether it's a good or bad action, we establish or we strengthen a neural pathway through the medical term as myelinization. Most people call it muscle memory. So if all we ever go to do is, whatever the go signal is, whether it's an audible go signal or it's a visual or whatever the case may be, the gun comes out and we shoot a prescribed number of rounds. What happens every time the gun comes out and we're involved in an incident? It becomes a shooting solution. So how do we train students to process information and understand, number one, have they met the preamble for my gun to even come out? Because we're in a walk around in an initiative deficient state where we don't get to choose the time and the place, somebody else does. And so we have to do something to gain the initiative. And one of the things with it, at least in the state of Tennessee, because there isn't a brandishing law here, that the gun can't come out until means, intent, and ability are met. And so say they meet that preamble and, we go and we draw the gun, but in the process of us employing the gun, they decide that we're not a soft target and don't want to play anymore. But we haven't trained to stop the action that we started, and we shoot somebody that doesn't deserve to be shot. So I know that's a lot to get back around to, the original question that you asked. But so with training, what I look at for recent, relevant, and realistic is, let's look at actual encounters and scenarios that people are, having, and base our training off of that, especially after we have a foundation of, the mechanics of shooting and the application of the fundamentals of marksmanship, draw stroke, things like that. And so how do we stop? How do we draw out to a ready position and give verbal commands? How many times do people practice verbal commands? Now, I know from my previous profession, I'm really used to using a command voice and teaching. Most people aren't. And so I'm like, I want you to learn that.
Hard for some people to find their voice, honestly.
You're absolutely correct. And so it's like, well, let's do it here while we're in a controlled environment and there's no repercussions if you mess it up. How do we change the stimuli? Because a lot of times on the range, what's the go signal? It's a beep or threat or, go or whatever the case may be. Now, out in the world when you're walking, something audible might cue you into it, but how do we process information? We process it visually. So we get a visual stimuli as a parameter met, and then we go about solving that problem, or verbal commands or whatever the case may be. But how many times do we replicate that on the range?
Not very often.
So I've done some things. John Hearn is doing great work right now in that. John Holsham is also. I know Brian Hill, he's doing things there, and I'm trying to do it too, in their shadow, because I'm just a little guy. They're big popular guys. I'm just a little guy, but different things for visual stimuli to, hey, it's time to shoot, draw out and shoot. The parameter's been met. You're in the middle of shooting. It's another visual stimuli that you need to stop shooting now because they're not there. So we also have to understand our processing speeds and reaction times. I draw out, they don't play, and there's a visual stimuli that you draw out to already and give verbal commands. So I think that's how
We're only playing one scenario on the range. And we're playing that one scenario over and over and over and over and over and over again, which is I have to shoot this guy as fast as I can, however many shots the instructor told me to, which some instructors don't do that, but many do. They prescribe the round count on what that is. And then everything's done. And that is the one scenario we run over and over and over and over again. Well, if that's the only scenario you run, then what's going to happen out in real life? I wonder, when things are changing dynamically second to second and different decisions need to be made, or other things need to happen as prerequisites to be even drawing a gun to begin with. I mean, that's a lot of information processing that I don't believe a lot of people get to. And as you and I both know, Shane, most people take their check the box concealed carry class that teaches them how to pull the trigger and how to get their sights on target. And that's probably all they learned.
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit of law if we're lucky. And then they're sent on their way. And so this information processing under stress is still, there I go, right back to the same thing. It's like, it's one of the most key components. Now, I say that as someone who already has a good foundation in the fundamentals, right? And I think that is always the baseline. That always has to be established first before any more cognitive load is put on a person. But once a person has a good foundation, that next step, I think, that most people don't take is really one of the most critical for me. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
Hey guys, I want to offer you something that is a personal touch, something special that I can share with you to help you grow and develop along this journey in this path as a defender. And what I'm offering is a monthly live call that you can participate in. And we're going to be talking about the 4 areas that I believe all defenders of life should be strong in. And those are physical fitness, emotional fitness, spiritual fitness, and training. So if you're interested in learning about those things and developing yourself throughout that journey, I'm here to help you. And I want my paid subscribers to have that personal touch of getting to talk with me one-on-one in this group call and sharing with others and encouraging others along this path. So if you'd like to get in on those calls, go to defenders-live.com, become a paid subscriber. I cannot wait to see you there. And thank you so much for your support of Defenders Live.
Staying recent, relevant, realistic, I think, too, for us as instructors is continuing to go out and be a student.
Yeah.
And so along these lines, and I did a class a couple months ago. It was Jeff Boren and Akil Gadar from, Range Master, and they've got their own thing. And I want to plug their business, but I can never remember.
Citizen Safety Academy.
That's it.
Yeah.
Sorry, Akil and Tiffany. I love them to death. Yeah. But they've changed the name of it now, but it was Foundations of Reality-Based Training, the Pathway to Performance. And it was very neat. It was went in and Jeff did some lecture and talked about, associated things. We went on the range and we did a little bit of skill check and just, flat range, traditional, stuff to see where everybody was at, and also understand, for the instructors to understand, but also the students to understand their limitations. Mm-hmm. And then it went with phototype targets and scenarios that was all done live fire. And you did several of them. And I thought it was great. But Akil had said during the class, the way that they look at it is for somebody that takes their concealed carry class, whatever that version is in the state, that this would be kind of the next course. So they've kind of got a little bit of the fundamentals, and they go into that course because, there's a lot of processing information, critical thinking, and solving problems, which is, realistic. Yeah. For
That's
an
so
encounter.
Good. I'm so glad they're doing that.
Yep. That's awesome. Yep. I think it's great. And I really enjoyed the course.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When people have the basics down, they have the fundamentals down, and they've got a good foundation, I've noticed, at least, when you start adding movement and decision, target acquisition, and having shoots and no shoots, that's when they really start getting excited. Like there's this new energy that comes into the students where, a lot of them are they're really enjoying it. And that's part of learning, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, there needs to be that factor involved in order for them to push the edges of, what they're comfortable with and learn and grow. So I always get excited when I see that.
Yeah, me too.
And it's fun as an instructor too, right?
Well, I mean, why are we there? Why do we do what we do?
Right.
It should be for the student,
Yeah.
you know, and when they grow and they get excited and you see the light bulb go off and, that puzzle piece falls into place.
Yeah.
I think that's the most gratifying thing, at least for me anyway.
Yeah.
Thing that I can get, but about the only thing that tops it is having a student come and say, hey, I was involved in an incident and what you taught me got me out of it. And I went home to the people that care about me. Mm-hmm. I think that's about the only thing that tops it. But otherwise, you're on the range and you see them working problems. Mm-hmm. And, maybe they look at you for the solution. And I'm like, the answer, just work through it. There's no consequences here. I'm not going to shoot you in the big toe or something if you screw up. And
work through it and then learn it.
Yeah. And then it clicks. And you can see it on their face. You can see it in their demeanor and their confidence goes up. And it's like, in my opinion, that's why we do what we do.
And that's where we develop, I think, those personal connections with people where they really know we have their backs.
Yeah.
I was on an interview with Ross Hick last week, and he shared this information with me, which rocked my world, and not in a good way. He said that I forget by what age it is, or if it was just throughout their lifetime. I think it was throughout their lifetime. 40% of women will go through some sort of sexual assault of some kind. 40%. And I thought of the all women's classes that I've taught before, and to think that 40% of them have gone through an assault like that.
Sure.
And it really put into perspective for me of the sense of confidence and this word gets overused so much, empowerment, but that's the word that came to my mind. But just this sense of when they leave my class, sometimes I can feel like they have grown into at least a slightly different version of themselves that was, I always could see was there, but they didn't recognize it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just that little stepping stone that even in that one class can give them just another added layer of protection in their life. And I also learned that someone who has been assaulted before has an even higher probability than someone who hasn't to be in that same position again. And I think it's because, unfortunately, I think predators can sense that in people, that vulnerableness. And I think they obviously know how to prey on that very well. But, I think if a person isn't given that opportunity to heal from that truly, and I'm not saying they're going to do that in a gun class, I'm not proclaiming that, but I'm just saying if they're given some opportunities and some tools in which to do that, that personal connection and that bond that can be made just within that one gun class can be a seed that's planted in that person's psyche, I believe, that can start a journey for them to being able to not be a victim again. And I think for many people, it seems as though, for me anyway, from my experience, that's kind of what some of them are looking for is to know that if I end up in this same situation, I can do this differently and I can be the one in control of it rather than being the victim of it. And that's just that's another element, as you were talking about before about being an instructor, that this responsibility we have is so, so important.
Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah.
And I think, it's the development of a protective mindset.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things, I mean, we emphasize it throughout, all the different classes and series and things that we do. But we start off at the beginning, especially with the pistol stuff. And even like our introductory class to protective pistol, which is kind of a novice, you're just trying to figure it out. We do a small mindset lecture there and spectrum of awareness, situational awareness. We really get into it in the first class, main class in the pistol series, our covert protective pistol. And I hit it in other classes. Like this weekend, I'll be teaching our 3-day arm protective measures, and I'll do a full mindset lecture, getting them to develop it and understand that they're important. And this kind of came from one time I was giving the lecture, and I had a woman in class, and she was like, she used examples. She's like, if my kids are with me, she's like, kind of the mama bear thing. I'll fight and do everything. But she's like, if my kids aren't with me, I don't know if I would have that fight in me. And I started to answer it, and Callie, my wife, interjected, and it was great timing, and especially coming from a woman. She said, "You'll fight when your kids are there, but she's like, if they're not there, you're not going to fight as hard. But don't you have a responsibility to your children to go home and to protect them and to make sure that, you know, they're safe and they grow up and all that?" Mm-hmm. And that really put it into perspective for her. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I integrate that in also. It's like somewhere someone loves you and expects you to come home. You have a large responsibility when you strap a gun on and step down the path to become an armed citizen. And part of that responsibility is being safe and going home at night to the people that love you and living a good life.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's unfortunate because that's kind of a doom and gloom, but we shouldn't really have to, you know, give mindset lectures and get people in the right mind, but we absolutely have to, I think. But you know, on the other hand, that's a good thing, though. You know, we have students that are coming in that want to cultivate that protective mindset, mm-hmm. want to live good lives and be prepared, not paranoid, but prepared. And if something arises, to be able to be their own first responder.
Yeah, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but there's something that came to my mind, which is actually kind of sad. And that is like, I'm thinking of, and not that particular person, I'm not saying they're like this, but it just made me think of a person who's thinking that other people, you know, their kids are more important to save than themselves, which I get. Like, you know, if I were to pick between my kids or me, and one of us had to go, I would go. But mm-hmm. But this idea that a person thinks that they aren't worth saving or protecting, right? Mm-hmm. That's a self-worth thing. And I'm not sure this is a conversation to get into that about, but at the end of the day, like, I think that might be part of the tie-in as to why a person who's been a victim before is likely to be one again.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that.
That element of self-worth is not there as much,
yep.
more than likely. Mm-hmm. And that is the premise, I believe, of being worthy of protection, whether you're defending yourself or whether you feel worthy that someone else would protect you. Yeah. And that I think that actually is probably a very deep root in some cases that if that could be addressed and looked at honestly, could quite honestly change a lot of things in our society. So completely there's my soapbox on that. I didn't expect to talk about that today, but there's always an underlying current of something going on with people, right? And the reason they have motivations for what they do in their life or don't do.
Sure.
And in that particular case, I just wonder if that might be part of it. But so let's land the plane with the class that you're doing with Brian Hill. What is it called? And then I also want you to talk about where people will be able to see you this mm-hmm. year, because I'm sure I'm excited because I know you're going to be at a Girl and a Gun National Conference this year, and I'm going to be there too. So I'm going to look you up so I can meet you face to face and shake your hand.
Awesome.
If at all possible.
Yeah.
So let's end with that. What is the class with Brian that you're doing?
Well, can I plug one more real quick?
Plug whatever
I'm excited about it.
Yeah, of course.
Because Brian and I have done the one already, and I do want to talk about that because I think
you have a new one, don't you?
I do. I have a new one. We're launching it here in July. It's on the website. There's a description for it, and you can sign up in that. It'll be in July. We're at our home range here at Montgomery County Shooting Complex in Southside, Tennessee. But I started thinking about, and we've got a pretty robust catalog of classes. I teach all of them. Sometimes I bring in some help, but I'm always the main instructor because that's what I want to do. I want to be that face. That's why I started the company. But I'm excited for this one. So it's called Armed Citizens Encounters, Tactical Anatomy, Trauma, and Treatments.
Wow.
So we're basically putting together, we'll do a heavy on mindset, heavy on tactical anatomy. We'll go out into the range, and understanding the tactical anatomy is in a 360-degree environment. Mm-hmm. So as we apply tactics and the movements and things like you were talking about earlier, as we add realism to things, where do we need to aim to get the bullets to go where we need them to go to get us shut down, and so they're not a threat anymore. Mm-hmm. So we'll do, performance shooting with a pistol, understanding your processing speeds, your reaction times, and where do we need to be in that so we can visually process information, make good decisions, and understand, do I still need to engage or do I need to stop? Did I get a desired effect? And then because bullets and pointy things go both ways, and, when we're in that adrenalized state and we have that, physiology that's going on with us when we have adrenaline, cortisol, and a bunch of other chemicals, we could be injured and we don't realize it, or maybe our family's with us, they don't realize it. So if trauma happens, what can we do about it? Because I would really hate for me or any student to come out on top in a critical incident or a gunfight and have a loved one that's injured and just watch them die because they don't know what to do. So we put the medical aspect in there, and then we tie it all together out on the range with putting shooting together and treatments. And I'll probably wrap it all up with a scenario with role players. And
wow. That sounds like a fun day. Is it a 1 day or 2 days?
It's a 2 day. It's
2 day.
It's a 2-day class.
And for those of you listening and not watching, it's personalsurvivalsolutions.com. That's where you can go look this up, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have that one, like I said, and I'm really excited because it's all gonna, we got the Tactical Anatomy Summit. We did the show with you earlier. I'm going out and taking Doc Williams's Tactical Anatomy Instructor course, shooting with X-ray vision, and then I'll roll into that class. So. I've already got the medical background from before, but I want to continue to be a student and enhance it. And so It's all going to culminate into that class. So
I love that. That sounds like a fun class and a very needed one. Very needed.
I think so. I was
kind of tied in almost everything we talked about. It's like we meant to do it, but we didn't, guys. We didn't plan it that way. But everything we talked about, you just tied into one class.
Yep, it wasn't planned, but it all came in together. So there's that one, and then the one Brian and I are doing is the Irregular Warfare Singleton Operator course that we started it last year. We did one down in Georgia, and then we did one up here. We had to actually go up to Kentucky to a different range because our home range was under construction, and we've got another one coming up in December. And Brian and I sat down and talked. We wanted to do a collaborative class together, but we didn't want it to be like, hey, we're going to get together and he's going to teach pistol and I'm going to teach rifle, and we're going to take our existing curriculum and just kind of throw them together. We wanted to kind of look at it for whatever the scenario is, if it's civil unrest or, there's a disaster, and look at like the LA riots or something like that. And it's you as a single individual and you have a rifle and a pistol and you're trying to get home, whether it's on foot, you're in a vehicle or whatever, how to employ them. And so it's not a novice shooter class. You have to have, a pretty good base, but it's also about making good decisions. Like what's the appropriate tool to solve that particular problem? Yeah. And it's a lot of times not always as straightforward. And I think Brian and I have very similar teaching styles, but we come from two very unique, different backgrounds. And it's been really, really neat. Like I said, we've done 2 of them. And so, and they were really well received. And, we've done a few podcast after actions and had some students on and stuff. Cool. And so we'll be doing that in December, again, here at our home range at Montgomery County Shooting Complex. And so I don't know the day. You have to check the website on the actual dates, but I know it's in December. Okay. And what are you teaching at the conference? Which one?
Oh, the girl in a gun one.
I'm doing 2 different blocks. I'm doing probably, well, I don't know how they're going to break up, but I'm doing gripping the pistol and what'll be associated with that is draw stroke. And so I'll talk about how I teach gripping the pistol and how to set yourself up for success with that, because everybody's different. Hand size, grip strength, flexibility, mobility, things like that, dexterity. So we'll work that. Then we'll work it into presentation. And then I'll also work a little bit in there of like, how do we work efficiently? How do we process information? When is the right time to employ the firearm? And then my other session is going to be shooting multiple targets, but integrated into that will be, again, our reaction times, processing speeds, determining how fast should we be shooting? Because, can I stop an action once I start it? Am I overshooting my headlights? Which I think having a surplus set of skill is good, because we know we all deteriorate under stress. And so we can call that up. And we talked a little bit about this, kind of prior to starting the recording. But there's a big thing of like, hey, how fast can I shoot a bill drill, or how fast can I do this, or what have you? And that's great when we're in a controlled environment. But like, how fast can I actually process information? And
that's really what matters. Yeah.
Yeah. So, when the gun comes out, what speed do I need to be shooting so I can see if there's a desired effect or if there's a change and be able to stop or make a correction? And so, we'll do some things with vision and understanding processing speeds and where's the sweet spot for folks. And then, how do we take that and put it into play with engagement of multiple targets or threats?
Sounds like a lot. That's good. Sounds exciting.
So,
cool.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. So, yeah,
You've got a good year coming up for sure.
Yep, and then I got one more. It's in September. I'll be second year presenting at the Combatives Association Summit.
Oh, cool!
I'll be doing a medical block there, and that's a really neat summit too. It's unique because it's a little bit different, than the shooting stuff. It's a lot of combatives, a lot of multidisciplinary stuff.
Yeah.
Craig Douglas is down there, Cecil Birch, all the Shiv Works guys, Jerry Wetzel, Matt Larson, the father of modern Army combatives in the military, and John Valentine sets it up with Matt, and a whole bunch more. It's all kinds of combative guys. It's a real neat event too. So I'm very humbled to be a part of that also.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you're doing great work.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I really appreciate our conversation today. I think it went well. I really enjoyed it anyway.
I did too.
Was there anything that we missed that you can think of? I think I covered all the bases pretty much.
Yeah, no, I think we covered all bases and managed to tie it all in.
I know. It's like that's awesome that worked out that way it did. It wasn't planned. So Personal Survival Solutions is where you guys need to go look up Shane Kerwin. As you can tell, he's a great guy. I can tell he has a huge heart of service, tons and tons of experience and skill, and as an instructor and as an operator. So what's not to love there? Go check him out. Really appreciate your time, Shane. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Humbled.